My wife told everyone I was dead. She stood at my funeral, tears streaming down her face, while I watched from a hospital bed 300 miles away. The invitation to her wedding arrived at my rehab center 6 months later. Victoria Blackwood cordially invites you to witness her marriage to distinguished banker Harrison Montgomery. I stared at the gold embossed card, my hands shaking. The woman who'd vowed to love me in sickness and health was marrying into old money while collecting my life insurance. What she didn't know was that I'd recovered. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 6 months planning. What she didn't know was that I owned the very estate where she'd planned her elaborate wedding. The venue she'd chosen to celebrate her new life was built on land I'd purchased under a shell company years ago. Before I tell you how I brought her empire crashing down, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. I'm Nathan Pierce, and I was a software engineer who built security systems for Fortune 500 companies. At 42, I'd created 3 patents worth millions and lived a quiet life with Victoria, my wife of 12 years. We met at a tech conference where she worked in event planning. She was beautiful, ambitious, and always hungry for more. I should have seen the signs. She grew distant after my company went public. Suddenly, my sweatpants and late-night coding sessions embarrassed her. She wanted country club memberships and galas. I gave her everything, upgrading our modest home to a mansion in Riverside Heights. Still, it wasn't enough. Then came the accident. A drunk driver hit me while I was cycling home from the office. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury. The doctors gave me a 30% chance of survival. I woke up 3 weeks later in intensive care. My body was broken, tubes everywhere, machines beeping steadily. The nurse told me I'd been in a coma. I asked for Victoria. The nurse's face changed, became uncomfortable. She said my wife had been notified, but hadn't visited in days. Something felt wrong. I couldn't speak properly yet, couldn't move much, but my mind was clearing. Through the fog of pain medication, I heard doctors talking outside my room. They mentioned how unusual it was that my emergency contact had signed a do not resuscitate order, then disappeared. That emergency contact was Victoria. My wife had tried to let me die. The realization hit harder than the accident itself. She'd signed papers to end my life, then vanished. My brother Thomas arrived the next day. He was a lawyer, sharp and protective. When he saw me alive, he broke down crying. He told me everything. Victoria had held a funeral. She'd worn black, accepted condolences, and given a touching eulogy about our love. She'd claimed my body was too damaged for an open casket. She'd cremated someone else, scattered ashes at sea, and collected a $2 million life insurance payout. Thomas had been overseas on business, unable to attend the funeral. When he returned and tried to visit my grave, he found discrepancies. He hired a private investigator who discovered I was actually alive in a hospital registered under a John Doe due to lost identification in the accident. Victoria had never corrected the hospital records. She'd let them believe I was an unknown patient. Thomas was furious, ready to call the police immediately. I stopped him. Something cold had settled in my chest where love used to live. I wanted to understand why before I destroyed her. We hired the investigator to dig deeper. What he found was staggering. Victoria had been planning this for 2 years. She'd increased my life insurance policy without my knowledge, forging my signature. She'd been having an affair with Harrison Montgomery, an investment banker from old money. His family was wealthy, but drowning in debt from bad investments. They needed fresh capital desperately. Victoria had promised them my insurance money and the assets she'd inherit as my widow. The investigator showed me photos of them together at expensive restaurants, laughing while I'd been fighting for my life. Recovery was brutal. Physical therapy felt like torture, relearning to walk, to grip objects, to speak without slurring. But anger was powerful fuel. Every painful step forward was motivated by the image of Victoria in her black funeral dress, fake tears on her cheeks. I pushed myself relentlessly. The therapists were amazed at my progress. What they didn't understand was that I wasn't just healing. I was preparing for war. Thomas worked with the investigator to track every move Victoria made with my money. She'd purchased designer clothes, jewelry, a new sports car. She'd rented a penthouse apartment in the city. She was living the life she'd always wanted, funded by my supposed death. Meanwhile, I stayed hidden, officially still a John Doe, in hospital records. 6 months after the accident, I could walk with just a slight limp. My speech was normal. My mind was sharper than ever. That's when the wedding invitation arrived. Thomas had it forwarded from my old address. Victoria was marrying Harrison at Thornhill Estate, the most exclusive venue in the state. The venue that my shell company, Pierce Holdings, had purchased 5 years earlier as an investment property. She had no idea. I'd bought it under layers of corporate protection, something I'd learned from years of protecting digital assets. The property manager, an old friend named Carlton, nearly had a heart attack when I called him. He'd read my obituary online. I explained enough to get his cooperation. We had work to do. The investigator, a former FBI agent named Rodriguez, gave me everything I needed. Bank statements showing Victoria had spent $1.4 million already. Email records of her conversations with Harrison, laughing about the stupid husband and his convenient accident. Text messages to her sister revealing the truth, how she deliberately left me for dead. Legal documents showing the forged signatures. Insurance fraud evidence. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a calculated murder attempt and systematic theft. Rodriguez asked me what I wanted to do with the information. I told him to sit on it for 3 more months. I wanted her to feel safe, secure, completely convinced she'd gotten away with everything. I wanted her to stand at the altar thinking she'd won. I spent those months making preparations. Carlton helped me understand every detail of Thornhill Estate's wedding package. Victoria had booked the premium service, 300 guests, champagne fountains, imported flowers, celebrity chef. The total cost was $400,000. My money, of course. She was spending my insurance payout to fund her fairy tale wedding to the man she'd cheated with while I lay dying. Thomas handled the legal aspects. We prepared lawsuits, criminal complaints, fraud charges. Everything was documented, witnessed, and ready to file. But I didn't want her arrested before the wedding. I wanted something better. I wanted her to experience the same humiliation she'd inflicted on me, magnified and public, in front of everyone who mattered to her. The day before the wedding, I checked into a hotel near Thornhill Estate. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I'd lost 30 pounds, gained it back as muscle. My hair had gray streaks now from the stress. I looked older, harder. Good. I wasn't the naive husband anymore. That man had died in the accident. This version was something else entirely. Carlton called with the final details. Victoria had arrived with her bridal party, 8 bridesmaids in silk dresses. Harrison's family had taken over the West Wing, 3 generations of Montgomerys, pretending they still had the wealth their grandfather had lost. The guest list read like a social register: politicians, corporate executives, socialites. All there to witness Victoria's triumph. None knowing they were about to see her downfall. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. Sunny, 75 degrees, light breeze. I dressed carefully in a tailored suit Thomas had brought me. Navy blue, crisp white shirt, silk tie. I looked respectable, powerful. Not like a dead man. Not like a victim. Carlton had arranged everything. I would wait in his office until the ceremony began. Then we'd execute the plan. I watched through the window as guests arrived in luxury cars. Women in designer dresses, men in expensive suits. They air-kissed and compared watches and bragged about vacations. This was Victoria's world now, the elite circle she'd murdered me to join. I saw her sister Patricia arrive, the one who'd helped cover up the fraud. She wore pink and a satisfied smile. The ceremony began at 2 o'clock in the estate's grand garden. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, rose petals scattered on grass, string quartet playing classical music. I watched on the security monitor in Carlton's office. Victoria appeared in a dress that probably cost $50,000. White silk, long train, cathedral veil. She looked radiant, glowing with happiness. Harrison stood at the altar in his tuxedo, tall and confident. Old money arrogance in every line of his body. The officiant began speaking about love and commitment. I almost laughed. Victoria's father, who genuinely believed I died tragically, walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. He was a good man who had no idea his daughter was a monster. That made me hesitate for just a moment. But only a moment. The officiant reached the important part. If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. The traditional pause, usually just ceremonial. Carlton gave me the signal. I stepped out of the office and walked toward the ceremony. My shoes crunched on the gravel path. Heads turned. Whispers started. I kept walking, steady and calm. Victoria had her back to me, facing Harrison. But Harrison saw me coming. His face changed, confusion first, then recognition, then pure terror. He'd seen my photos at Victoria's house. He knew exactly who I was, or who I was supposed to be. Dead. Victoria noticed Harrison's expression. She turned around. Our eyes met across 50 feet of manicured lawn. The color drained from her face. Her bouquet fell from her hands. I stopped at the back row of chairs. 300 people stared at me in complete silence. Victoria's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. I smiled, not warmly. "Hello everyone," I said clearly. My voice carried in the quiet garden. "Sorry I'm late. I died, apparently, so I missed the rehearsal." A few nervous laughs from people who thought this was some kind of performance. But most guests looked confused, sensing something wrong. Victoria found her voice, finally. "Nathan," she whispered, then louder, "Nathan. Oh my God, Nathan." She started toward me, arms outstretched, tears already flowing. The performance of a lifetime. "You're alive. You're alive. I thought you were dead. They told me you were dead." I held up one hand, stopping her mid-step. She froze. "Did they tell you I was dead, Victoria?" I asked calmly. "Or did you tell them?" The garden went completely silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Her face shifted, calculation behind the tears. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "Nathan, you were in an accident. The hospital called me. They said you didn't make it. I planned a funeral." I nodded slowly. "You did plan a funeral. Beautiful service, I heard. Though I couldn't attend, being busy surviving in a hospital 300 miles away. Where you left me registered as John Doe. Where you signed a do not resuscitate order. Where you hoped I'd die, quietly, so you could collect the insurance money and marry your boyfriend." The gasps from the audience were audible now. Harrison took a step back from the altar. Victoria's tears stopped instantly. Her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Pure calculation. "You're confused, Nathan," she said, her voice changing to something pitying. "The brain injury. The doctors warned me you might have cognitive damage." Turning to the crowd, she continued, "He's not well, everyone. This is tragic, but he needs medical help." I pulled out my phone, held it up. I'd prepared for this. "Would you like me to play the recording of you telling your sister exactly how you left me for dead?" I asked. "Or should I show everyone the bank statements of you spending my life insurance money? Maybe the emails between you and Harrison, planning this wedding while I was in a coma?" Victoria's face went white. Harrison turned to run. Carlton appeared with 2 security guards, blocking Harrison's exit. I'd arranged that too. Thomas emerged from the crowd with Rodriguez, the investigator. Both carried thick folders of evidence. Victoria looked around wildly, searching for escape or support. Her father stood up, his face showing dawning horror. "Victoria," he said quietly, "is this true?" She spun toward him, desperation replacing calculation. "Daddy, no, he's lying. He's sick. He doesn't understand." I stepped forward into the aisle. "I understand perfectly, Victoria. You tried to murder me for $2 million. When I survived, you pretended I died anyway. You committed insurance fraud, forgery, and attempted murder. All to marry into money and live the life you thought you deserved." I looked at Harrison. "A life built on my corpse." Rodriguez stepped forward, showing his credentials. Former FBI, now private investigator. Ladies and gentlemen, I have documented evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. We've provided copies to the district attorney's office, which has issued warrants. He nodded to two men in suits standing near the back. They walked forward, showing badges. Actual police detectives. Victoria, the female detective, said, "You need to come with us." Victoria screamed, "This is my wedding. You can't do this. This is a mistake." She grabbed Harrison's arm. Tell them this is wrong." But Harrison pulled away from her, his own face panicked. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I didn't know he was alive. She told me he died in the accident." I believed her. "I'm a victim here too." I laughed bitterly. "You're a victim, Harrison? You helped her spend my insurance money. You planned this wedding with stolen funds. Your family needed capital, and Victoria promised to deliver it using my death. Don't pretend you're innocent." Thomas stepped forward with another folder. "We have your emails too, Harrison. Discussions about the insurance money, how to invest it, how to save your family's failing investments. You knew exactly where that money came from." Harrison's mother, a thin woman dripping with old jewelry, stood abruptly. "This is preposterous. The Montgomery family does not associate with criminals. We had no knowledge of any impropriety." I turned to her, my voice ice cold. "Your son is marrying a woman who committed insurance fraud to fund your lifestyle. Check your bank accounts, Mrs. Montgomery." The detective moved toward Victoria with handcuffs. Victoria backed away, shaking her head frantically. Wait, can't we discuss this?" "Nathan, please, I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I still love you." The words were hollow, desperate. Everyone could hear the lie. I met her eyes, with no emotion in mine. "You don't love anyone but yourself, Victoria. You saw me as an obstacle, then as a paycheck. You wore black to my funeral and cried fake tears while planning your next move. You spent my insurance money on designer clothes while I relearned how to walk. You were going to build your new life on my grave. But I didn't die. And now, neither does the truth." The detective placed handcuffs on Victoria's wrists. Her face crumpled, real tears finally coming. Guests were standing now, some recording on phones, others simply staring in shock. Victoria's father sat back down heavily, looking 10 years older. Her bridesmaids backed away from her like she carried disease. Harrison was being questioned by the second detective, his confident facade completely gone. I turned to address the crowd one final time. "I apologize for ruining your afternoon," I said. "I know you came here expecting a wedding. Instead, you've witnessed justice. For those who actually cared about me when I supposedly died, thank you. Your sympathy meant something. For those who came here to social climb and network, well, enjoy the story. I'm sure it will make excellent gossip at your next gala." Carlton stepped forward. "The estate will be closing for the remainder of the day. Please exit through the main gates." As guests filed out, murmuring and staring, I stood and watched Victoria being led away. She looked back at me once, her face showing something that might have been regret. Or maybe just regret at being caught. I felt nothing. The love I'd had for her died in that hospital bed when I learned what she'd done. This wasn't revenge. This was simply correcting the record. I wasn't dead. I was very much alive. And she was finally being held accountable. Thomas approached, putting a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Better than okay." I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of her betrayal, the anger, the pain, all of it was lifting. Justice wasn't just satisfying. It was liberating. The legal aftermath was swift and brutal. Victoria was charged with insurance fraud, forgery, filing false death reports, and attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming. She took a plea deal, 15 years in prison. Harrison faced fraud charges too, receiving 5 years. His family's reputation was destroyed, their social standing obliterated. The insurance company sued to recover their payout, plus penalties. Victoria's assets were frozen and seized. The penthouse, the car, the jewelry, all gone. Her sister Patricia faced charges as an accessory. Victoria's father visited me privately, apologizing with tears in his eyes for his daughter's actions. I told him he raised her the best he could. Some people just choose wrong. He asked if I could ever forgive her. I said forgiveness was between her and herself. 6 months later, I stood in the rebuilt garden at Thornhill Estate. Carlton and I had become good friends. I decided to keep the property, turning it into something meaningful. Today was the grand opening of the Pierce Foundation Retreat Center, a place for survivors of traumatic injuries to recover and heal. Free of charge, funded by my patents and investments. I'd found purpose in my pain. The accident and Victoria's betrayal had broken me physically and emotionally. But breaking down meant I could rebuild myself stronger, better, focused on things that actually mattered. Thomas stood beside me as we cut the ribbon. My parents were there, grateful to have their son back. Friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage had returned to my life. I still had the wedding invitation Victoria sent, kept in a frame in my office. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a reminder of truth. She'd pretended I was dead to fool the elite, to buy her way into a world she thought she deserved. Instead, at her extravagant wedding, the secrets she'd buried destroyed her empire. The mansion she'd wanted was foreclosed. The social circle she'd craved rejected her. The life she'd built on lies collapsed completely. Meanwhile, I lived. I healed. I found purpose. Looking back, I realized Victoria had done me a favor. She'd shown me what really mattered. Not money or status or impressing people who didn't care, but integrity, genuine relationships, and using whatever time we have to make things better. I died in that accident, but the person who came back was someone I was proud to be.